If anyone has any questions, please feel free. You should all be unmuted. If anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself and just ask one, or you can use the chat. Pick whatever makes you more comfortable. Any questions, folks? How does the word mitzia? So kama, thank you for asking. Okay, so the word kama means in Aramaic is the first. Mitzia is the middle one. Mitzia also means middle in Aramaic. It also means matzah, to find, hence the confusion. Okay, so let's go back to the screen sharing. When Rebbe had that lesson, when Rebbe had that, thank you for asking again. Sorry, these are my settings, excuse me. I'm sorry about that. I just want to go back to that. I think it was lesson 6 or 7, where Rebbe, right, it's Aramaic, right. So it's different, right. In other words, let me just show you here, where Rebbe, where Spivak made that, that big, listing them all together. So again, in Hebrew, we say the word, it sounds the same. I don't think that, I can't imagine they did this on purpose. I don't know if it was a play on words, but the word Basra, we have more often in the Gemara. Kama is the first, Mitzi is the second, Basra is the third. Okay? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Emtza, very good, thank you. The word Emtza is in middle. Emtza is a word that means, you'll find there are many similarities between Aramaic and Hebrew. Not for now. I don't want to load you up with extra information. So Elu Mitzia, Baba Mitzia. Remember, let's go to the files. Can't unmute. Oh, let me check. I may have muted you coming in. Just a moment. Hang on a second. Let me just go to my settings. Here we go. Okay, you're all unmuted. If a few of you talk at the same time, we're going to have a problem. Did somebody want to ask? Let me just answer this question, please. Question, could you please clarify the relationship between Elu Metzias and Bava Metzia? So here's the relationship. In Masechtas Nezikin, in this big one, all about damages, there are 30 prakim, 30 chapters. So it was divided into number 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Basra means the last one. Metzia means the middle. Very good. Emtza. Emtza in Hebrew means in the middle. And Kama means the first. Now, Baba Metzia has 10 prakim, has 10 chapters. The second chapter of Baba Metzia is Elu Metzias. Okay? So the second chapter, that's the correlation. So if somebody were to ask you, what's your son learning this year? So you could answer Baba Metzia, which would be a fair answer because that's the Gemara that they're learning. A more specific answer would be Elu Metzias. Okay? So the Elu Metzias is the Perek, and Baba Metzia is the entire book, so to speak. A chapter is Elu Metzias, and again, remember we said yesterday that the chapter name it's not necessarily a definition of the whole Gemara, of the Perek. It's usually, almost always, the first couple of words. So Elu Metzias Shalai, that's how it starts. These are the lost objects, or the found objects that he's allowed to keep. So it's called Elu Metzias. Okay? That's correct, right? So in this case, there is no correlation between the two, correct? The name of the book and the name of they just happen to sound the same. Okay? So again, this question, Elchanan's point, there's no correlation between the two. That's correct. It happens to be, if I can digress, we're in Q&A, so I can slow things down a little bit. And, I once went to a lecture by Rabbi Dr. Heschel Fried, who was he's a professor at the Stern College, a tremendous Talmud Chacham, and I was in the Talmud Torah leadership program, and he presented to us, and he said something that I just stuck with me, since then. He was telling us not to make assumptions about what people know or what people don't know. Always assume that they don't know, and it's your job to explain it. When you ever had these speakers at a simcha, somebody gets up at a sheva brachas at a party and says, anyway, that famous Gemara, right? I never said that in my life. Never once. That famous Gemara. Well, if people know that if they know the Gemara, they know that it's famous. And if not, if you're saying a famous Gemara, you're telling everybody. If you don't know it, then you're an ignoramus. So what Dr. Fried was impressing upon us is don't make assumptions about what people know. And it hit me very strongly teaching my 8th grade class, because I mentioned yesterday, I try to make the kids comfortable to ask whatever they didn't know. And I realized very early on that I just wasn't teaching enough. And there were a lot of things, for example, this, that could make you a little crazy. That it would be Baba Metzia, Elu Metzias. What do you mean Metzia? Metzia means something found. How does it mean middle? Okay, so Dr. Fried, what he gave us the first 3 psukim in Parshas Vayeshev. We were 18 school principals. I'd like to think we were average intelligence and knowledgeable on Judaic studies and learning matters. And he told us here's what his assignment was. The 3 psukim, it says, Vayeshev Yaakov ve'eretz Megurei Aviv. Yaakov lived in the land of Canaan. These are the stories Ela told us. Yaakov Yosef was 17 years old. He went to his brothers, and he was friendly with the children of Bilhah and Zilpah. And Yisrael loved Yosef more than the others. That's it. Now, Dr. Fried told us that we should make a list of things that people would need to know to make these 3 psukim make sense. In other words, if you came in as a teacher and all you taught was just the text. If you came in and you just said the text, okay, Vayeshev Yaakov, and Yaakov lived be'eretz Megurei Aviv, and didn't give them any context. So we sat there scribbling. He gave us like 20 minutes, a half hour. We sat scribbling there, saying, okay, so Yaakov lived in the land of Canaan. Yosef was his favorite son because he was Rachel's child, not Leah's, and Bilhah and Zilpah were made. We wrote whatever we thought was needed. One thing none of us wrote, none of the 18, he asked us in the 3rd pasuk, it says that Yisrael loved Yosef more than his other children. Now, you may know that it's a famous statement that Yaakov is interchangeable with Yisrael. That was the second name that Yaakov was given. If you don't know it, the psukim, that pasuk doesn't seem to make any sense. It says that Yisrael, who's Yisrael, loved Yosef more than the other kids. We're going to hold it. Yosef was Yaakov's son. So just not having that little information can throw you off completely. So I started trying to think of the Gemara like this. This was 40 years ago, 39 years ago. And I started making lists of the questions children were asking me, like one of you asked me just now, right? Is it a coincidence? I thought I explained it a bit. I probably, what didn't drill down enough on it. I believe I said that Metzia means 2 things. But again, that's to try to create that environment. Okay, so the drill down further. My son is learning Baba Metzia, Perik HaMafkid. So Perik HaMafkid is a Perik within Baba Metzia, not Elu Metzias. Okay, that's just the last question we had. Okay, so Elu Perik HaMafkid is Elu Metzias is a chapter. Baba Metzia is the book. Okay, folks. Anything else? If not, we're done. I'm sorry, I skipped above. Oh, it's Rabbi Yehuda arguing. Thank you, Rabbi Yehuda arguing the Tanakama. So it actually. So that's a good question. Thank you. So let's just explain let's explain Mel's question here. I actually, okay, I purposely went over that. Maybe I should have explained it or gone through it. I didn't want to dwell. I thought there was too much information for one night already. But I'll just go through. Mel's question is here. If you follow at the end here, after this whole Mishnah, so the Mishnah says, these are things you're allowed to keep, and these are things you cannot keep. The last thing that he mentions, thank you, Mel, for reminding me. Like I said, it was a different thread. I just wanted to just stop. I felt that I was throwing out too much information. You meant Rav Shimon ben Elazar, right? Is that what you said? Rabbi Yehuda or Rav Shimon? I'm sorry. Rabbi Yehuda, Amakal Sheyesh by Shinoi, Chayiv Lachos. No, it would seem that this would be an explanation. It would seem, at least at first glance, that this would be an explanation, because it's not really a conflict with what he says. In other words, what he's asking, Tana Kama that he wrote there, that Mel wrote in this question, Tana is, again, Tana was a person of the Mishnah. Kama means the first, well, as in Baba Kama, right? The first one of the Baba Metzia is the middle one, Kama is the first. So Tana Kama is Gemara speak for the first person, the first Tana who was listed, often without a name. Okay, the Mishnah says, Matzah Paris Mufuzaran, we refer to that as the Tana Kama. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says that if there's something uncommon, right, that if there's something uncommon, then there's no siman. Then it is a siman. You're allowed to keep it. One could interpret this. We're going to leave this. You could interpret this that he's just explaining the above, or look what Rabbi wrote here. In the cases Rabbi Yehuda lists seem so unusual that they certainly seem to have a siman. It's hard to imagine why Rabbi Meir argues and says they do not have a siman. The Gemara will explain exactly what Rabbi Meir is arguing about. We won't be learning Gemara. Be patient. If you look in Rashi, if you very often in Rashi says the Gemara mefarish. Rashi was the premier commentary mefarish on the Gemara. Very often you'll see Rashi says mefarish the Gemara. The Gemara will explain this later on. But if you look at it at first glance, it would seem that Rabbi Yehuda is just clarifying. The Gemara later will talk about, and these things are really bizarre. These are not simanim like we said earlier that they drew a Sefer Torah on it. These seem to be very out of the ordinary simanim here. I didn't say Rav Shimon ben Elazar kol klei an puria, and again, this is something that the Gemara is going to be talking about later. So that's why I just left it. Okay, folks. Two messages. Just a moment. The Brises. Right. So the Brises. Thank you. The way the question asked was, where are the Brises printed? If they didn't make it into Mishnahs, and the Gemara references them, where are they found? So typically, the Brises were like floaters. In other words, there were the Mishnah when the complexity of what Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, of what Rebbe had to do, was enormous. Again, he had this huge body of knowledge, divided up into categories and write books and chapters and sub-chapters. Now, another decision that he had to make is what do we keep in Mishnah? If we mentioned everything that everyone said, Mishnah would have been many times larger than it was. So very often Rebbe would either pick the mainstream opinion. It could have been what a majority of people had said. In this case, there were a number of scenarios. If you want to know where the Brises are listed, the Brises are listed in the Gemara. In other words, typically an Amira, which is the Gemara, will mention that he heard this Brisa from his Rebbe. So a Brisa would mean, in other words, it's as if you're saying, I heard this teaching from someone of that previous generation, but it wasn't listed in any of the Mishnayos that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi pulled together. So it was knowledge that was given from Rebbe to Talmud, and it had to be clarified. Now remember you played telephone in school, you gave a message to someone and they gave it to somebody else. So realize that chain of transmission very often was broken, where people lived in different countries and they had different rabbeim. So not everything was always exactly as is. So when they got together to discuss the Gemara, people would mention these braisos. Let's say this, for example, the potato chips, right? The Mishnah would say the bracha is a bar priyadama, and someone would say, hey, hold it. My Rebbe, I distinctly remember my Rebbe saying that it's Sha'akol, and then the Chachamim there would try to evaluate what's real and what's not, what was correct and what's not. Okay, folks, have a wonderful evening. I hope you found this helpful. Tomorrow we roll up our sleeves and we get to our first Gemara lesson. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. I hope you found it helpful. I'm going to circulate videos tomorrow